Welcome back to the show. Today I want to share some thoughts with you on ask lots of questions. Ask lots of questions. If you get as old as I am, and or if you know people that are older, you realize that they have learned over the years to ask more questions than the average person that walks the streets every single day. I believe that the more questions you and I ask, the more answers we're going to get. That's fairly obvious. When I was younger, I used to watch a guy on TV by the name of Larry King. And Larry King worked for CNN, and he was an interviewer. He was a news guy. And if you ever watched any of his shows, you could really see how he would ask questions to people that he was interviewing. And it was very curious. He never interrupted, like you see a lot of folks do on the TV today. They interrupt their guests all the time. But Larry King would ask a question, and then more times than not, sit like this and pay attention to what the individual was asking. The older I get, the more questions I'm starting to ask. So that is the big picture of what I want to share in this episode. It seems if you read books by people that are really smart, you're going to find that the people who ask the most questions are always in charge. If you've ever worked for a leader, I'm not talking a manager, I'm talking a leader. There's two different categories here, leaders and managers. If you've ever worked for a real leader understands the power of asking questions. Because the right question at the right time can change the direction of our lives. Again, the right question at the right time can change the direction of our lives. And I think if you stop and think about it long enough, there have been maybe a couple of people in your life that have asked you the right questions at the right time, which then impacted your life in a dramatic way. There's a guy named Tom Hopkins who consistently would ask his students, are you doing the most productive thing at every given moment? Again, are you doing the most productive thing at any given moment? And I have that little quote in my office to remind myself, am I wasting time or am I leveraging time? So the more questions you ask yourself, the more people that you surround yourself with that will ask you questions that will propel you to make some hard choices, it can really dramatically change your life in a tremendous way. So let's go through today some questions that I've learned over the years from some very smart people that may seem obvious, that may seem simplistic, but maybe you want to write maybe a few of these down. Question number one is, what am I becoming? What am I becoming? A lot of people I've met over the years, they're waiting for things to happen to them in a good way versus creating things to happen in their lives. I had breakfast with a very close friend recently, and he said something to the effect of, he said, John, you're the epitome of tenacity, because I'm working on some projects that I've gotten hundreds of rejections on. And he complimented me in a very kind way, meaning that I was an example, or one of the examples in his life, about somebody that keeps pushing forward in the middle of rejection. And oftentimes, you and I should ask ourselves, do we want what we want bad enough? Or are we going to allow the excuses and the feelings and the discouragement to get in our way from pushing through some of the most difficult and challenging times in our lives? Another question that you might want to ask yourself is, what can I learn from this? What can I learn from this? Every single situation that you and I go through, there are many lessons in the situation that you're in. Maybe it's a TV show. Maybe it's a job interview. Maybe it's a rejection letter. I got a rejection notice in the mail, email the other day, and I'm not going to get into the details of it, but it was very eye-opening to uncover how this group of people think. They use certain phrases which gave me, okay, no wonder they said this and that, because they think this way. How you think will either take you far in life, or it's really going to hold you back in life. A big one for me, Another question is, how can you communicate so that this other person can understand you? Again, how can you communicate better in a way that will help the person that you're trying to influence understand what you're trying to say? Now, let me kind of invest some time into that way of thinking. Most people, and I did it for a long time before I learned this skill set, is most people expect everybody to understand what they're saying and how they're saying it based on who they are. Let me say it maybe a different way. If I'm Italian and I want to address an audience that are French, and I'm speaking Italian and I'm expecting the French people in the audience to understand me, I need to rethink how I'm communicating, right? That would make sense. If I want the French audience to understand what I'm saying, then what do I need to do? I need to learn French and be fluent in French. Most of us, when we're addressing people, I'm not only talking in a crowd, because most of us don't speak in front of audiences, but even one-on-one, we approach people in a way that we expect them to understand us instead of us understanding them first and then communicating in a way that they will be responsive to. Let me give you a deeper level of understanding. There's 4 different types of people out there. 2 of those 4 are the outgoing type, and 2 of those 4 are the kind of shy and the internal and the quiet type. If the loud outgoing type tries to communicate to the group that are kind of shy and kind of internalized, the communication is not going to go very well. So the smart person will ask questions and will address and will talk to the quiet type in a way that's kind of low key. And if you switch that coin around, if you're a kind of a shy person and you want to influence the lives of people that are kind of, loud and my way or the highway type of folks, then you have to ramp up your communication and you have to ramp up your questions that you ask in order for them to understand what you're saying. So more importantly, I think that when you and I communicate with other people, we have to identify the people that we're trying to communicate with and understand them first. One author says that you need to seek to understand, then be understood. So if you understand the people that you're trying to communicate with, then that opens up a tremendous amount of opportunity to not only serve those people, but also to have a synergistic relationship that goes on where that people can communicate, a lot of stuff can then happen. So another question I want to ask is, why should my company be proud of me for working for them? Think about that a minute. Why should the company that you're working with be proud of what you do? Are there things in your workplace that you can excel in better? Are there roles that you're avoiding that maybe you don't want to do it because you don't want to look foolish in the environment that you're working with? And also, are you going the extra mile at work, not just once in a while, but every day? Let me ask it a different way. Are you doing your very best every day at work? Are you going above and beyond your duties to do your job with excellence instead of just getting it done? You and I have to ask ourselves a lot of questions. Again, I'll say it maybe a few times in this show. The older I get, I'm asking myself a lot more questions. Let me say it a different way. The older I get, I'm questioning a lot more things that I thought were true once upon a time. Think about that in your own world. Think about that for just a moment in your own life. Have you thought about the things that you thought were true more than you have been in the past? That is, have you now assumed for the last bunch of years that everything that you thought was true is true? I'm asking you today in this show in a variety of different ways to start questioning everything. Yeah, question everything, because when you question everything, it opens up answers. It opens up another viewpoint, another angle, another point of view, another way of thinking that can dramatically change your life in a tremendously powerful way. But that doesn't happen unless you choose to ask a lot of questions. Another question that I think that is really important that you and I need to ask more often is what's next? You know, oftentimes you and I get into this rut that what is will always be. Again, what is will always be. Well, that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. I say this a lot in the shows, but if you invest in books about people and written by people who have succeeded in dramatic ways, you're going to see that every single one of them fell on their face over and over again. They reassessed why they fell. They asked themselves lots of questions. What was involved in me failing in this situation? And then they got back up. They tweaked a little bit what they were doing. Maybe they started all over again. I don't know, depending on the situation. And they kept moving forward. The more questions you ask of yourself and others, the more answers you're going to get. Again, the ones who ask the most questions are in charge. Let me share another example. If you pay attention to the salespeople in your life, whether it's a car salesman or a person or an insurance person or an air conditioner person or a carpet person, if you listen carefully and if they're really good at what they do, you're going to find that they're the ones who ask a lot of questions. Their questions are leading you down a path to an agreement to sign a contract for whatever they're marketing, whether, again, it's a car or a carpet. So you can see that there are people in your life, I'm sure there are at least one, that have used questions in your life to manipulate you, maybe in a good way, maybe in a not so good way, to get you to do things that they want done. Let me give you another example that's not so pleasant. There is a small fragment of the population called sociopaths. Sociopaths have mastered the skills of asking questions that will pull their victim to do what they want to do. That is, they understand that people are moved more so by questions than they are by statements. If you look at any of the politicians that have been in the United States over the last bunch of years, one of the big questions are you better off today than you were, 4 years ago? Are you better off today than you were 8 years ago? So that prompts a response, doesn't it? Because most of us don't want to not answer a question. So when you respond with an answer, your ears hear your words in your voice, and then your mind goes to work to making those answers true. Now that I could invest an hour just in that statement alone. So it's very important for you and I to be careful who we allow in our lives, who we allow in our circle that will ask us questions that either can move us forward or take us backward. This is super important. In my own life, I'll get personal. In my own life, I have had to limit down even more the people that I allow into my circle because some of the questions that they ask put me in a mindset that is not very pleasant. It puts me in a mindset that's very negative. It tempts me to go down a direction that is not productive because of the questions they ask. So I'm thinking about you in your own life. If you think about the people in your own circle, some of them are family, some of them are relatives, some of them are coworkers, some of them are neighbors, some of them are acquaintances. And they understand that the questions that they've been asking you get you to do something that they want done that maybe isn't so good, maybe isn't so honest, maybe isn't so ethical. I'm asking you today to be careful about the questions that you allow into your own life. Now, so let me kind of ask you another question that I ask myself often because I have to. And that question is, What would I do differently this year if I had no fear? Again, what would I do differently this year if I had no fear? One of the big aha moments for me is when I realized that most people struggle with fear. I'll go a step beyond that. Most people will then use fear as a reason not to step out and do the extraordinary. I'll say it again. Most people will use fear to keep them from stepping out and doing the extraordinary. So there came a time in my life, not that many years back, that I had to ask myself, what's the worst thing that could happen if what I was attempting I was going to fail at? What is the worst thing that was going to happen if what I was attempting to do I was going to fail at? Well, the answer was pretty obvious that I would fail at it. I would not succeed at it, but at least I attempted it. So here's the bigger question that has motivated me to do things that are outside of my box in a dramatic way. And that is, can I live with my regret for not following through on some of the things that I've been attempting recently? I'll say it maybe a different way. When I get old, am I going to live with myself knowing that I shoulda, coulda, woulda tried these things in my life in the past, but I didn't do it because I was afraid? And I think you might be struggling with that too from time to time. That you've been given opportunities, or maybe you've had a desire to do something beyond your comfort zone, but you're afraid because you've never done it before, or maybe you don't think you're qualified, or maybe no one else has ever done it in your family. But it's burning deep down in your soul that you want to try this. You want to stretch and do this different goal, this task. But nobody else has done it before. So I ask the question again maybe for you. Are you going to be able to live with yourself when you're old and gray because you chose not to do these things that you have a passion to do on the inside because you were afraid? I'm challenging you today to ask yourself some questions that if you ask those questions enough times, it should prompt you to do some things that are quite extraordinary. Because if you don't ask yourself the right questions at the right time consistently, society is going to ask you questions, and they're going to keep you down. Next question for you today to maybe ask yourself. What do you care most about in your life that people could not possibly talk you out of? Again, what do you care most deeply that no one that's able to talk you out of it? I think there are a lot of people that are wishy-washy. You know, there's been, I'm embarrassed to tell you, that I've had some very strong beliefs in a certain area, and they're not major beliefs, little minor things. But then I'll watch a program or hear a program or read an article, and instantly that thing I've held on to for 30 years is now gone because this new idea in this new concept, which after I did my homework was not really based in fact. But yet I let go of something that I held on to for 30 years because this seemed to be a little easier to swallow. So what question do you think you need to ask yourself? What one question do you think that you need to ask yourself that would literally set you free? What is the one question that if you had the answer to maybe, or maybe you needed to ask yourself the question that would set you free? Let me kind of say it a slightly different way. There are people in your past that have done things to you that was a result of things that happened in their life that they didn't learn these lessons that I've been trying to teach in these programs. That is, that they have just passed on their pain, they have passed on their misery, they have passed on their habits onto you. Now my question for you, again, I'm asking a lot of questions today, but one of my questions to you is, are you going to continue to pass that which you dealt with for decades onto the next generation, or to your neighbor, or onto your family, or onto your coworkers? Or are you going to look back at what has happened to you and realize that it's got to stop with me? I know somebody who their grandfather was an alcoholic, their father was an alcoholic, they were an alcoholic until one day. One day, in a barrage of rage and being drunk, this individual picked up his little son by the leg. I'm getting a little graphic, if you'll forgive me. He picked up his son by the leg and was about to bash that little child into a wall. And then he looked down at his other little boy and saw the terror in his eyes, realizing, what are you doing to my brother, Daddy? So the father that had the leg of this little boy in his hand asked himself in that split second, what am I doing to myself? What am I doing to my family? And within a very short amount of time, he stopped drinking completely. And he hasn't had a drink in, my goodness, probably 50 years now. As a result of the question he asked himself in a moment, in a second, in a fraction of a second that could have been deadly. I have another person I know that was addicted to alcohol. This is a younger person, well, younger meaning in her 50s now. And she woke up one day and realized enough is enough. She asked the question, am I going to grow old and become and remain in this alcoholic state for the rest of my life? What I'm trying to share with you in a variety of different ways is the questions you ask yourself are very important. The questions that you allow to go into your own mind consistently can literally change your life in a dramatic way. So another question for you today is, what is going to be your legacy? What is going to be your legacy? I would submit to you that most people live and die and nobody knew that they ever lived. I'll say it again. Most people lived and died and nobody ever knew they lived. Here's been my answer for some of those pertinent questions, and that is, the more I do for other people, guess what? The more you do for other people, you will then live through them forever. Let me say it again. The more you do for other people, you will live forever through them. So if up to this day, if you're watching, all your life is all about you, guess what? Nobody's going to remember you 2 years, 3 years, 10 years after you die. But the more you do for other people consistently, that's the operative word, consistently, you will be remembered for a long time. If you get into the habit of reading books about people that have been there and done that and have excelled, one of their goals, one of the questions that they ask themselves is, what can I do for other people? I'm asking you today, what can you do for other people? And as a byproduct of that question, if you decide to start doing things for other people, you as a byproduct will in fact live forever. So how can you help other people reach goals and dreams that are maybe beyond their expectations? And I think it's hopefully obvious by this show, is by asking them questions that helps them think and expand their mind in ways that are dramatic, that will get them to stop what they're doing and realize, or maybe ask themselves, am I getting where I really want to get in life by doing what I'm doing right now? Let me ask you, are you getting anywhere in life by doing what you're doing right now? If not, that's insanity, isn't it? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. That's somebody's definition of insanity. Again, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Yes, there's a storyline about consistency. I get that part. But doing stupid stuff and expecting good things to happen is just oxymoronish, isn't it? So as we wind up the show today, what is your legacy going to be? How are you going to get from A to Z today? It starts with the questions you ask yourself consistently. It might be a good idea for you to put them on the refrigerator. Maybe 3 questions a day. Pick them. There's thousands of questions you can ask yourself to get you out of bed, to get you doing things that are uncomfortable, that get you stretching so far outside of your box you can't even see the box anymore because you're so far away now from what you used to be. Master the power of questions, and questions will change your life for the better. My name is John Carver. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back real soon.